Hello, and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened, where we discuss, explore, and connect with fellow empaths, healers, intuitives, and seekers.
There are a couple of sound glitches throughout this episode, so our apologies for that. It really doesn't impact much of the episode. Thank you.
Hello, empaths. We hope you're having a great start to your week. Denise and I are so excited to share some questions and stories that you all have taken the time to send us for our monthly community connection show. Remember, if you want to submit a story or a question, you can always email us enlightenedempaths@gmail.com. Denise, do you want to start us off?
I'd love to. Our first one says, I heard on a past episode that you can release from any vows made in past lives, like the vow of chastity or poverty. How would I go about doing this? One option might be to go to a trained practitioner, whether it's a shamanic practitioner, or you can do the work on your own through Akashic records. But I think the important part is to go back and find it, and you can always rewrite the script. You can rewrite the contract.
I think the belief is that if like in a past life you were a nun or a friar or a priest and you had to take a vow of celibacy, chastity, you had to take a vow of poverty, that vow can kind of project itself into the future of the future lives that we have. And so some people think that if you have issues with abundance or receiving money, or if you have issues with intimacy, it could be connected to a past life vow. Do you believe that as well?
Well, I think that it can be that. It can also be in what we are saying in our everyday life. If you get caught in using the words like, I always struggle with money, or I never am able to have a happy relationship, you're building that in this lifetime. So it might not even be from a vow from a past lifetime. It might be something that you've been telling yourself repeatedly throughout this time frame. And I think that that's an important consideration to keep in mind, because we get caught up on this loop tape of, oh, it's my karma, or I did this in another life. And if you think about it, karma is about who you are, what you've been through, and how you've reacted. And it's this exchange and understanding of energy. It's not seen as punishment or payback. But when you're looking at taking a vow, if you go back, you can identify, is this a repetitive energy pattern? Am I compensating? Am I trying to pay off some retribution? So those are usually the three karmic sources and energy patterns for any kind of a vow or something that we might have agreed to in a past life.
And I think at any time you can always do a cord cutting meditation and ask to release yourself from those vows that are holding you back or blocking you. And I always like to do cord cuttings. And then I will say, if there are other blocks in my life or other blocks that are connected to these past vows or past issues, make me aware of them and illuminate the correct path for me to take to heal that. Because sometimes we have to, take the reins back in our own hands, but we also have to remember that this is the divine dance and we need to do so in cooperation with our higher power. But I
Oh,
do think it can be done, right?
oh, very much so.
Yeah, I do too.
And I think this is a good time to be doing that with this shift in energy. It's a good time to say, okay, enough of that. I don't want to feel that way anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, eclipse season. We should have done it then. Okay, our next one says, I have a question about manifesting. To be specific, I'm working on starting an online Reiki business. I read a great article that gave the suggestion to write down my specific goal on a small piece of paper 3 times and put all 3 Reiki symbols into it and meditate with it daily, while also imagining it being real. I did this and it feels good. However, I have one confusion. So I wrote down the specific number of clients I would like to see each week. I said, I see these clients with ease. This feels good for me to say. At this moment in my life, the number of clients I want is quite small, but it feels perfect for right now. So my question is it bad to have that specific of an intention? And is it okay to manifest this specific goal at this moment in time? And then once it comes and the time is right to shift to possibly more clients, then I could create a new manifesting goal to work on next. I just want to make sure this goal for right now is not going to send out the energy to the universe that this is the specific goal I want forever. Okay, I think that's a great question. And I do love writing down goals on a piece of paper and adding the Reiki symbols to help charge it. I think that's fantastic. I, okay, so one thing, when we are working with manifesting and creating goals, there are some magical words you can say at the end of your specific goal, and that is this or something better. Because what you're doing then is you're telling the universe right now, at this moment in my life, I can handle this amount of clients. However, comma, I am open to this or something better. So you're telling the universe what your needs are right now, what you can handle right now, but you're also being complicit in and open to the universe handing you even more. So I would say you're doing everything right. Just add that phrase, this or something better, and know that as a co creator of your life, you can always amend that. Denise, I think you are the best at setting goals and achieving them, but you and I also work well with this. And we've done this where we've set goals like right now we're comfortable with this many people signing up for our webinars. And then, the next year we might have changed that.
Mm-hmm.
Always works for us.
Right. And that can also be really helpful with financial goals. I would like to bring in X amount of money or more. Because I think when you add those or more or better, or when you open it up and let spirit bring that much more to you, then you might limit yourself by receiving.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to add something else. When she says that she wrote down her specific goal and wrote it down 3 times and put the Reiki symbols, something else I like to do, fold it 3 times, but fold it towards you each time so that you're bringing that energy that you're putting out there into your life. Little woo-woo tip that tends to work for me. And a quick plug, I am teaching a class on manifesting on Wednesday, June 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern. It will be recorded, taught live over Zoom, but emailed to you guys the next day. And you get my 60-page book on manifesting. You get a downloadable meditation, and you get lots of great tips on using feng shui and crystals and all sorts of other cool stuff to help you manifest. So I hope you guys will join me.
That's wonderful. Our next one, I was wondering, would it be possible for grounding to have an effect on the grass flower of where you live or practice, or perhaps the grass and flowers responding to all the geomagnetic storms entering Earth? Personally, I think both, because if everything is alive and vibrating at a certain frequency, it's going to pick that up on some level we may or may not be aware of. So if everything has some kind of an energetic imprint that it or that's not the word I want. If everything vibrates at a certain frequency, then it would make sense to me that the grounding would impact it. Just seeing the difference in, this is the scientific part of it. Just look at the difference with the practicality of soil temperature, or you add a certain amendment to your soil, or it's everything. And the geomagnetic storms, I think the same thing.
Well done. Okay, our next one is kind of heavy.
You don't want to add anything to that one.
No, no, because you're the garden girl. You're the one
Oh
who knows
no,
that
I have
way better than
weeds.
I do.
No, no, no. I have weeds. Anyway,
You do not.
go
Let
ahead.
me tell you, everyone, she could live off the land, legit could live off the land, which I find so impressive, Denise. I really do.
I might live interestingly, but
I've always said if there's a world catastrophe, I'm putting the kids in the car and we are headed up to you.
right. We would have plenty to eat. I can guarantee that.
Yes.
Anyway.
Okay. Our next one says, I have a question about soul plans. If someone is taken away from their birth family for abuse, and then they're adopted by a family and abused in a similar way, is this something they chose to go through when they created their soul plan? That's heavy, right?
Oh, it's very heavy.
And I have a hard time saying yes to that question because then it kind of puts blame on that person in a weird way. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah,
Now, I do think that sometimes we do choose these really, well, actually, I believe we choose almost all of our difficult experiences and our beautiful blessings as well to help our soul to grow, to release and heal old karma, to create beautiful new pathways for ourselves. And so I do think our soul does choose a lot of these difficult experiences, but that can be really, really hard to grapple with if you have experienced this in addition to being adopted, then I think that's a sign that you have an old soul and you're ready to tackle some really heavy, hard stuff because you have it within you, within your energy to really heal from that and do some beautiful work. But that doesn't mean that you have to live with that pain forever. And so I do think it's important to remember that we can amend our soul plan while we're here on earth through things like meditation and manifesting and cord cutting and self-healing and self-love and self-forgiveness and compassion. But I think the short answer is maybe so. Maybe your soul did choose this as a way to not only heal or break a generational chain, but quite often, especially with older souls, they tend to choose these difficult experiences so that they can truly be teachers and healers for others.
that's incredibly well said. And I think that it is, for anyone who may have been in this situation, that's horrific to think that you would finally be safe and then not be safe. I was thinking the other day about soul families versus the people that come into our soul group. Like we
Like our
might
soul
include,
tribe, like our soul
yeah, yeah.
friends.
I think that that would be an interesting show at some point to see how the two differ or are the same. And
Yeah.
I think soul plans would be a part of that.
I love that. I think it's Gaelic, Anam Cara. It means soul friend.
Oh,
Yeah, I
oh,
love that idea that there are
that's
people in our lives who are Anamkaras. They're just our soul friends, and they come into our life to really be the wind beneath our wings, or for us to help be the wind beneath theirs as well.
right. That's beautiful. Our next one, I've heard you both talk about linking in or tuning into your guides or your intuition or a loved one on the other side. What does this mean specifically? How do we know when we're linked in or tuned in? I think you and I do this differently, but we have the same result in
Hmm.
how we go about it. I think this comes back to how you process and receive energy and information. We've talked about this in other shows. Are you clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant? How do you process in your everyday life? I think that that's part of this. But for me, it is a knowing, a sense, and you're basically reading the auric field. So if I'm connecting with someone in spirit, on some level, it's the same as if I'm psychically reading someone that's right in front of me. I'm picking up on the energy that they're presenting to me, and they'll use whatever my memories, experiences, expertise are to bring through those messages. So I'm a conduit. It's not about me. And I think I can feel it physically in my body if that spirit comes closer. It's a blend or a trance state, and you'll start to feel that energy. Almost the way I can describe it is if you're standing in a line to check out and someone gets a little too close to you and you step away a little bit, sometimes spirit will feel like that when they come closer, like they're kind of coming closer to your energetic field. You can do meditations where you go into your heart, you put a ball of energy in your heart chakra and lift it up and connect it with your crown chakra energy and send that out and expand it and ask things to come closer and meet you, sitting in the power, basically. Uh, when you say specifically, I think it depends on how you're wired and how it comes through for you. For me, it feels different with guides or angels or people in spirit. And I know this sounds kind of hokey, but it's a different vibration. It's a different level of energy. So my physicality adapts to that, depending on what I'm connecting with. It sounded
Yeah,
kind of convoluted, I think.
No, not at all. I think you did that beautifully. And you're right. It's going to feel different for everyone. But I think as empaths, all of us can understand what that's like to feel physical, like, a live person's physical energy in the room. Like, take, for example, when my sister Courtney walks into a room, you feel it. She's always positive and buoyant and upbeat and extroverted. And if you're in a bad mood or a funky mood or a sad mood, and you hang around with Courtney for 5, 10 minutes, you're going to be positive and up and cheered up because that's just the energy she brings, right? And you're going to feel that in your body. You're going to feel this amplification. Whereas I have another friend who we call like our little rain cloud, and she's great and deep and intelligent and wonderful, but she's often kind of, the world is ending Eeyore type thing. And so when you're around her, you're going to feel more heavy, more grounded, more focused on the reality of stuff going on in the world and the news. So that's how it is for me when I'm linking with spirit. Like I feel that. Usually I feel their personality, whether they're like an upbeat, happy, energetic person, or if they were an anxious, troubled, stressed out person. I can feel that in my body the same way I do when I'm with friends and I can feel their moods. When I'm linking in for myself personally with meditation, time becomes irrelevant. I'm not aware if I've been meditating for 5 minutes or 25 minutes. And that's often a sign that I'm linking in. And I feel a sense of clarity. I call it like a spiritual hug. When I have a good meditation experience with my higher self and my guides, it's like being hugged. It's like being cocooned in a lovely blanket of love. And it's a calming sense. So it's a different energy when I'm linking in for myself with my team versus for someone else for a reading. But it's to me, it's very similar to feeling the energy of a person that's alive and well that you're just talking to.
Oh, that's excellent. That's a really, really nice way to describe it.
But you know it, don't you? When you've got
Mhm.
that link, you definitely know it. And it's
Yes.
hard, it's apparently, for me anyway, hard to put into words.
But it gets easier with practice because I do think it's muscle memory. The more you practice, the more you get comfortable in how it feels for you and how it works for you. So you and I both described two different situations, but as I mentioned before, we get to the same place, and everyone is going to find their way that works the best. And best case is you figure it out, or you take different classes, or you read different books and say, oh, this is the one that fits best for me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it does take time. And the last thing I just want to say is when I am linked into spirit, maybe because they're not, encumbered by a physical body, but their energy vibrates so high that the information and the feelings and the insight that they're trying to send through me comes so fast
Hmm.
that it amps up my energy naturally. And that's another sign that I'm linked in. But
That's an important, yeah, that's a biggie, isn't it?
yeah, and it can be hard to catch it. Does that make sense? Like it's not like gosh, I'm no John Edwards. It's not like they're sending me so much information that I'm like, "Oh, what do I pick from first? Your first name, your last name, how you died?" Or, it's not like that. But they're sending me so many emotions and pictures and images and symbols that I have to be very, very still to catch it.
Hmm. It's a
Okay.
good point.
Our next one says, we recently experienced the tragic loss of my 5-year-old cousin. Can you talk about what she's doing on the other side? Will she go to school? Who will take care of her? Will she grow up on the other side? I'm having a hard time coming to grips with this and just have so many questions. Oh, that's a hard one. We are so sorry for your loss. I have always found that no one is alone on the other side, for one thing, especially children. I remember one of the first mediumship connections I made was with my sister, who I was just talking about. It was with her mother-in-law, who was a great woman. She had 7 children. And one of the first things she said to me was, I have a job. I have a job on the other side. I'm taking care of the babies.
Oh,
And ever since then, when I do a reading, I'll ask, do you have a job on the other side? And most people do have a very, like, that 9 to 5 gig, apparently people, it ain't ending in this lifetime. So there are specific people who are in charge of watching over the new souls, the baby souls, but also the newly arrived transitioned souls. And there's guides and angels who are in charge of this sector as well. So your 5-year-old cousin will never, ever be alone. Usually they are greeted by family members who have gone before them. And even though you might be thinking, well, my 5-year-old cousin is not going to remember my grandmother, who passed before she was even born, the soul knows, the soul remembers. And I think that's important. So she will be with family, she'll be with guides and angels and wonderful human beings who have a special, compassionate heart for children. I have done so many readings with kids where they are in school, where they are with other people their age. And I do think that they grow up on the other side. I think we're all constantly growing. And typically they tend to wait for their closest family members to transition before they choose to reincarnate, if they reincarnate. But they're definitely busy over there. They can definitely check on us and see how we are doing. And it's, it's a heavy and enormous loss. But I hope that you find comfort in knowing that your cousin is not alone and is well looked after and well cared for.
That highlights beautifully how different people connect with spirit because it, I love that that's the way that it comes through for you. It isn't the way that it comes through for me. And I maybe I'm too much of a realist and I haven't, I always say, well, I guess I'll have to wait until I get there. But I do know for a fact I've never seen a child alone and they have recently I did a reading and I said to the grandmother, and I've done readings for this family before, and the little girl passed when she was maybe 5 or 6. She was younger. And in my head, I heard clear as a bell, I'm 12 now. I'm 12. And I got an image of this girl who was, you know how some kids when they're around 12, they get very lean and they're in that in-between stage. And that's what I saw in my mind's eye. And that was the energy that she presented with. So even though logically I knew that she was, that when the age she was when she passed, and I didn't consciously remember how old she was going to be. And I said to the grandmother, I said, well, would she be, about 12 years old? She says, yeah, her 13th birthday is coming right up. So do I think that they do age? Yes. Do I think that equally spirit will present to us in a way that will recognize them? And I think that that's really important. So how many readings have you done, Samantha, where you'll get someone and you'll say, wow, they feel like they're younger. And they'll say, well, they didn't pass until they were in their 30s, but they're presenting as a younger energy.
Yeah, that can definitely happen for sure because they're doing and growing and evolving over there just as much as we are here.
Right, right. And if we look at this, that we're an eternal soul, that part of us is eternal. And we do continue to, as you said, to grow and to evolve. We're not limited by the physicality of being in this lifetime. But I think it's important. You can always look to see who someone's with. And don't you find that as well, that usually I'll do a scan or they'll bring someone out, look who I'm with, or it I rarely, if ever, have connected with someone that was I could only get their energy. They usually let you know who's with them.
Oh, for sure. And there is a whole life that they're living over there, which I find fascinating. Years ago, I did a reading for a woman who lost her daughter tragically and suddenly. And in one of the readings, the daughter came through and she kept showing me a backyard pool. And I described it, and the woman said, "That's our pool." And the little girl was shaking her head and she said, "No, neighbor, neighbor, neighbor."
Hmm.
And I was like, what is happening? And then anyway, it took me a long time to figure out what she was trying to tell me, but she was showing me that there was a neighbor who had a similar pool and they were going to be friends and do work together. And at the
Oh,
time, the woman was like, okay, like she didn't care about meeting a neighbor or making a new friend or doing work. She was grieving her child. Well, months later, she called me. A new neighbor moved into the neighborhood and rang the doorbell and said, "Oh, supposedly you have I don't know, she wanted some type of saltwater pool with this rock stone thing. Can I look at yours and see, blah, blah, blah. So they became friends. Turned out that she had also lost a child recently,
Oh,
and they started a grief support group for parents in town. And this little girl was trying to show me on the other side, she had made this friend in heaven. And the two of them conspired to get their parents to meet in this way so that they could help each other grieve.
oh,
And I just think that's not proof, but it's an evidence or an example of how they are living a whole life over there.
yes. And it's it's been rare. You get the jobs all the time from people. I get that once in a blue moon. And years ago, there was a young woman who had, she passed way too young. All she wanted was to have a baby. And when she came through, she showed me clear as a bell, clear as you and I are talking, that she said, I help. She go, and I could see it in my mind's eye, clear, clear, clear. She would go on the oncology units for kids at night and help them transition. She would go and play with the kids on the oncology units, and she would be there to help them as a liaison to pass. And it
Wow.
still gives me willies every damn time. And I would love, love, love to be able to do that with everyone that I connect with. But it's kind of in that same category of I don't usually get names. And if I do, I'm going to be a hell of a lot more excited than anybody I'm reading for.
Same. I wonder if some of our stories about angels appearing at certain times are really these people and these souls, and it's their job to help
Oh, I
people.
think so.
You
I
know?
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder that too.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
So this next one I slid into the mix because this was something that happened recently, and I'll read what I put on the notes. I was recently working with a group of people on a Zoom call, and a woman shared that she had a quartz cluster that she'd had for quite some time. And she'd recently gone through a very trying time emotionally and being a caretaker and witness for her parents' passing. The cluster is always laid flat and when she woke up one day, the whole base of the cluster had bowed up significantly. And she held it up and showed it on the Zoom call. And it was definitely a holy shit reaction because it was a very marked bow. And my initial logical response was asking, was there a heat source? Could any of the physically impacted it? And she said, no, it's all the same. It's in the same place. And then someone in the group said, we need to ask Samantha. So that's what I'm doing. I'm asking you because it was so significant. And in literally the quartz cluster was probably bigger than the palm of her hand. So it was several inches, had several the clusters, and it was like the front of a ship.
Wow. Okay. I have seen so many miracles happen with crystals, and sometimes when I talk about them, I'm almost like embarrassed that it's coming out of my mouth because it sounds so nutty, right? But
Mhm.
crystals can do stuff like this. Don't ask me how. I don't know. I just have seen it and experienced it with my own eyes. Now, quartz clusters, their job is to help everybody work together. Because think about what a quartz cluster is. It's a bunch of little crystals, and they're all sharing the same base. So they all got to work together on that base of that crystal to grow and flourish and harmonize. So I always tell people you should have a quartz cluster in the main room of your home, dining room, kitchen, living room, because that's what it's going to help do, is help everyone work together. And if she's going through this very trying time emotionally as a caretaker and a witness, watching someone transition to the other side that she loves, that quartz cluster is probably bowing up to symbolize and let her know we're all holding you. We are all holding you together. We're all going to rally the troops in. What's that expression where you kind of tighten the anchor around you so that everyone
Mhm.
can be tight and in close and in this together. And so I think that's a beautiful example of that cluster quartz letting her know that's what they're doing with her and for her.
Okay, so another part of the story was in between. She had been out of the country taking care of her father, came back, taking care of the parent, came back, and did this really deep soul level sound clearing, sound healing session with someone. And she said, I could feel all of this energy releasing from me. It didn't I don't believe it happened in her home where the cluster was, but if we change our vibration with what we're holding in our bodies, do you think that that could have an impact as well?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And it could be that crystal's way of telling her that she's doing that.
Okay. It
But
was,
crystals, they can always do amazing things. One of the craziest things that happened to me was when I bought a Lemurian crystal, and it was my first Lemurian crystal. And if you buy an authentic one, they ain't cheap. And I spent so long looking for the perfect Lemurian for me, and I found it, and I was so excited. And I was working with it all the time. And I remember I was on the phone with my friend Joel, and I was walking around. I always walk around and do stuff when I'm on the phone. I'm putting laundry away and I'm emptying the dishwasher. But for some reason, I'm also holding this Lemurian, and I'm walking across the tile floor in my kitchen. And this tile floor is like a monster. Anything that drops on it shatters. And I dropped the Lemurian, it slipped from my hand, and it fell into three pieces.
oh,
I was so sad. I almost cried. And Joel was like, it's okay. Joel's my crystal expert friend. He said, it's okay. Get 3 bags, put loose sage in them, put each of the broken pieces in them, and stick it in a dark place like under your bed. So I said, okay. Now, what I remember, Denise, is when I was picking up these broken pieces, when I put them in the individual little Ziploc bags of sage, of loose sage, my hands were bleeding. That's how cut the edges were.
oh,
And Joel said, leave them under your bed to heal for several months and check on them in a couple of months and see if they've healed. And I'm like, what do you mean healed? Like a crystal can't grow when it's separated from the earth. And he was like, well, they've experienced a trauma, so you just got to give them time. I was like, all
mhm,
right. So a couple of months later, a good friend of mine is going through a yucky divorce. And for some reason, I kept thinking about those broken Lemurian pieces. And I thought, it'd be nice if I could see if one of those is ready and she could have it as a reminder that broken things heal. So I pulled it out from under my bed. Denise, the bottom of each of those 3 cut pieces, smooth as glass.
wow.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So anyway, I gave her the broken piece that had healed, explained to her what it meant, and it didn't make her divorce magically easier, but she sure did get through it successfully.
And they are a living thing. I mean, it goes back to what we keep saying about vibration and frequency. They're alive.
They really are, and they are hardworking little friends of ours too. All right, our next one says, I started a spiritually based business doing readings and energy healings about 2 years ago. It has changed my relationships with my partner and also with my family, causing some very significant changes in the direction my life is taking. I know I can't go back to hiding who I really am, but I feel a great loss and fear about where my life is leading now. I find I'm going to be more dependent on generating my own income. How do you deal with the ebbs and flow of having a spiritually based business? Ooh, that can be very, very tricky. I have always found that when you are living and walking and breathing in your truth, the truth of who you are and why you came here, everything else eventually falls into place. Now, if family and significant others aren't being supportive, that's very, very difficult. And you might have to take a step back and really examine, is me stepping into the truth of myself, my authenticity, my personal power? Is this causing the issue, or is this a symptom of an issue that's been there for a long time? Don't you think
I
sometimes?
think that's hugely important. That's huge, 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 because we've said this in countless episodes. When we make changes in our lives, it can be uncomfortable for the other people around us because that means that you've changed the rules. It's different now. You're not the same person. And I think if especially if someone can't embrace who you're becoming and they want you to stay stuck where you are, that could be symptomatic of something that's always been underlying.
Yeah, exactly. And so there might be some changes that need to happen there as before, and it might not really have anything to do with your spiritually based business. It might have to do with you finally taking the reins of your life back and saying, this is who I am. Now,
Right.
in terms of generating your own income and the ebbs and flow, I think you were really good at talking about that, Denise, because you walked both worlds for a while.
If your heart is this is my belief system. If your heart is to do your work to be of service, no matter what it is that you're doing, you have to have that service aspect of it. You're passionate, you have a work ethic, you're passion, it's service or you're helping someone, you'll find a way to generate income with that. But you may also need to get a side hustle doing something that's not your favorite thing in order to. It comes back to how much the terrible way is not terrible, it's just kind of a cold, how hungry are you to have your business be what you want it to be? Because I truly, truly believe in my heart, if you're doing this to be of service, spirit will help you.
I do too. I do too. But I don't think, especially if a family is relying on you and your income, I don't think you should give up a job and benefits to just jump willy-nilly into this other world of a spiritually based business. I
Oh,
think, right?
if you don't, I really, well, we've talked about that as well, is if you're starting a business and it does have any business, it doesn't even have to be a spiritually based business. If you're generating a certain income level right out of the gate, that is going to make it that much harder. And when you do it from a spiritual perspective, that's putting a lot of pressure. If you have a little bit of a safety net, or huge, huge fan of a side hustle, is that build it up, and then decide. Because spoke with someone recently, and she said, "You were right." And I said, "Well, what was I right about?" And she said, "Years ago, you told me if you decide to go into this work full time, you're going to reach a point where you can't turn back and you're in it. And that's what you do and that's who you are." And she said, "I hit that spot. And it really surprised me how it changed my perspective about doing this work." Did that happen for you?
Yes, and but it happened for me slowly because I need to take these things slowly because it is very life-changing to step into doing this work. It really is. And other people are going to have reactions just like this listener is experiencing. You and I both taught in a traditional classroom full time for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, I would do readings at night on the weekends, and you did too. And it wasn't really until I had a solid client base that I stepped into this full time.
But I do know, if you're meant to do this work, spirit will keep bringing it back to you. And it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 20 years. You'll get the opportunity again. So if you're at a place in your life where you do need to, and I've said this again many, many times, I stayed in my job because I had a consistent paycheck. My children had medical. It was dependable. I had a schedule that could work around being a single parent. That's existing in the real world.
Right. And not everyone's going to approve of you or your work, and you have to make peace with that. You really do.
Right. Right.
There are, I have a friend and she's struggling because her brother's working for a collection agency, where you have to call people and be really mean.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I don't approve of that. And I'm thinking, well, okay, but that's his job and that's his choice. And you just kind of have to deal with it for right now. And I know that sounds a little rough, but I feel like that's how I was with this stuff when I was, I had family who was like, how can you charge for this? um, you know, if this is a gift from God, what do all that pushback. And it
Right.
wasn't until I just fully owned, like, this is who I am. This is why I came here. This is what I'm doing. If you support me, great. If you don't, let's still, let's agree to disagree about this and still get along.
Right. That's really important. And you know what just popped into my head is, remember when we talked to Dr. Kim and she was talking about stepping out of the matrix.
Hmm.
And this is another part of that, is with generating income. And uh, again, there has to be an exchange, unless you're so damn lucky that it just lands in your lap. But you have to put something out in order to be able to receive. It's that exchange of energy versus what you're offering, what's coming back to you. but I do believe that there is abundance and enough to go around. But
There
part of it
definitely
is shifting your mindset.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. And like you said, if you're meant to do this, the people will find you. If you build it, they will come.
Right. Right. And it comes back to being genuine and true and honest, and you and I both, we look at it as we work for ourselves, but we also work for spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our main boss, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's it for us today, everyone. We hope you enjoyed these insightful and deep questions and examples of how we're all in this together and we're all trying to figure out this beautiful journey hand in hand and heart to heart. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Don't forget, you can check out our work. Denise is at thegratefulmessenger.com, and you can find me at samanthafay.com. If you enjoy the show, please tell a friend or leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps us grow our listenership. Have a great week. Remember, as always, to show up, do good work, and share your light.
Take care.